cool as a prop. So
he might be lying about that. Welcome, everyone. Are you having a great Relix conference? I am Julie Hight, and I am a music critic, writer, journalist based here in Nashville. And you know John Oates. You know the great multifaceted musician, singer, songwriter, producer. We will be getting into the many movements, the many modes of his music making today. That is what we are here for. So, if you're good.
I am ready. Let's do this.
Now, John, there is a thing that I have seen happen with so many artists after they have tremendous popular success, where they have the impulse to kind of get back to their roots or kind of, get in touch with the music that was formative to them, whatever their musical canon is. And I would love for you to paint a picture of what that has looked like for you, because you have, over the last several years, you've shaped live shows, you've shaped albums around rural folk blues and the R&B that I know you loved and experienced firsthand in the 60s. So could you bring that to life for us? Paint us that picture.
Wow. Okay. What a way to start. That's a broad. There's a lot of broad strokes in that picture. But I think it's in a way. You said that a lot of artists who, I guess, as they mature or they get to a certain point in their career, they want to reach back. I think a lot of people in general have a fondness for the experiences that form them. It's like all of us who love music. The music you listen to as a young person, you always somehow, that's always very resonant in your experience and your the thing that you kind of go back to, as you kind of make it a standard, I think, that from which you judge a lot of things. I started singing and playing at a very early age, and because I'm as old as I am, I got to experience music before rock and roll, which is, I guess, unique in a lot of ways, because there's not one person in here is older than me. I can guarantee you that. So my parents...
We could take a survey if you would like.
No, I'd rather not. That might be too depressing. But anyway, but my parents were the World War II generation. They grew up on big band music, swing, that sort of thing. And so being a really little kid and being musically inclined, that's the music I heard around the house. It's the music that I related to. And then when rock and roll hit in the early 50s, I was aware enough to realize something new had happened, which I think is kind of a really unique perspective on things. And as I being a young guitar player, not being able to play very well, and luckily early rock was very simplistic, things like Chuck Berry and stuff like that, I could learn those type of songs with 3 chords and, try to emulate that. And so that was really the beginning. And as time went on in the late 50s and early 60s, the folk revival began on college campuses. And I was lucky enough to have a friend who had an older brother who went away to college in North Carolina, came back with all these amazing folk, traditional folk albums, and all the new folkies, the people like Joan Baez and Dave Van Ronk and New Lost City Ramblers, and all the younger people who were starting out basically the American folk movement, or reviving the American folk movement. And of course then I began to look into the originators of that, the actual, the authentic performers and singers and players who people like Mississippi John Hurt, Doc Watson, Son House, things like that. And so I had a chance to really experience that. And then those people, a lot of those traditional performers, came to Philadelphia, which was where I was living, and began to perform at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, the various coffee houses. And so I got a chance to experience the originators and their music firsthand. So it really formed the basis for everything I do. So, I like my roots are the early days of swing, and then moving into the early days of rock, Little Richard and Chuck Berry, Elvis, things like that. And then, of course, I said the folk movement. And so I blended that all together as I got a little older in the 60s, and I'm basically doing the same thing now. So.
Yeah, I mean, what was it like? What were you taking in when you did have the opportunity to see those originators, those elder performers? I mean, either in a performing setting or just in an informal setting through people you knew in Philadelphia.
Well, I had a guitar mentor named Jerry Ricks, who was he actually worked at one of the local coffee houses where a lot of these performers played, and so by default he became their guide in Philadelphia. You have to remember, a lot of these early blues men, especially coming up from the Deep South, they had no idea what to do in a northern city, especially in the early 60s. You know, they had no money, they couldn't afford to stay in a hotel. They would stay at my friend Jerry's house, and I would go over for a guitar lesson, and there would be Mississippi John Hurt sitting on the couch, and he'd be playing, and all of a sudden my guitar lesson became this experience, you know, where I could actually see him play. I could see where he was putting his fingers and how he was doing that. I was advanced enough as a guitar player to be able to emulate that. And, you know, it's a far cry from back, you know, nowadays, of course, if you want to learn a song, you go on YouTube and there's like, you know, 40 people teaching the same song, and 39 of them have no clue what they're doing, but there's one or two that probably really do. And it's really easy, and that's great. But back in the day, you know, I had to drop a needle on a record, you know, and if you wanted to learn a certain guitar passage, you dropped the needle and you listened to it, and then you picked it up and did it again. But, of course, you didn't know whether their guitar was actually in tune, so you didn't know exactly really what chord they were playing. It was much more challenging, let's put it that way. But anyway, I did have the chance to witness and really experience some of this firsthand, which is a really unique thing to be able to have experienced. And I'm very obviously grateful for it. And I feel like I want to, you know, kind of carry the flag for that in a way.
Absolutely. That's a tremendous thing to have lived.
Yeah.
And you know, you have in recent years returned to some of that music and reinterpreted it, shaped shows around it, recorded it. And I wondered if you could play us a selection from Mississippi John Hurt, Spike Driver Blues, which you've recorded.
Is that your personal request, Julie?
That is my personal request. Sure. And I also am curious what you found in the song returning to it as a mature music maker, and then what you wanted to bring to your interpretation of it.
Wow, she's a really good interviewer, by the way. Yes, you are. You are. Okay, well, let me just turn this little thing on. I'm not.
Told you he was going to play that guitar.
I'm not that much of a purist. Okay, let's see here. Well, I'll play a little of the Spike Driver Blues, one of Mississippi John Hurt's signature songs. And the thing I always loved about John Hurt, and the thing I identified about him early on, was that he wasn't, even though he was sometimes lumped into that Delta Blues category, he really wasn't a Delta Blues performer. He was a Piedmont from the hill country of Mississippi, and his roots were really more based on in ragtime. So he was a big fan of ragtime music and the stride piano style, which was very popular around the turn of the century. The other century. And it's characterized by a very even alternating bass line, which you'll recognize from a lot of other types of music. But it basically was a, you know, it's a guitar adaptation of the piano ragtime style. Oh, wrong song. Sorry. A steel dry man, name was John Henry. Well, he went down. He went down. Yeah, he went down. Go on, take this hammer to my captain. Or won't you tell him I'm gone? Won't you tell him I'm gone? Won't you tell him I'm gone? Woo. It's a long, long way from me, it's Colorado. Honey, to my home. Honey, to my home. That's where I'm going.
I mean, it's such a beautifully complete and complex style. It's all, I mean, it's simple, but there's so much going on inside it.
There's a lot going on there. But it's really fun. I mean, it's this very unique American traditional music experience. And it blends, and like I said, the fact that John Hurt would use a piano, a very typically piano technique, and adapt it to the guitar. And people like Blind Blake, who of course is, in my estimation, one of the greatest ragtime guitar players. But so it's just it's one of those things. But it took me a long time to learn it, and had I not been able to see it firsthand, it would take me a lot longer, I'm sure. So.
Yes, in person as opposed to on YouTube. Right. Yes.
Exactly.
And there were other components of, there were other kinds of music you were taking in those early years too. In the R&B that was coming to town, that was the stuff that was coming out of Chicago or coming out of the South or coming out of Detroit. As we try to picture, what the teenage musician John Oates was hearing, who he was becoming. What were you experiencing once you were able to get into a club and hear that?
Well, I was here again, growing up in Philadelphia. I was originally from New York, but as a little kid, we moved to Pennsylvania. Growing up in Philadelphia, it was great to be. I was in the right place at the right time. So we had this incredible, influx of traditional American music with the coffee houses and the Philadelphia Folk Festival, which has been going on for well over 50 years now. But we also had the Uptown Theater, which was a part of what was known as the Chitlin Circuit, which was, of course, the Apollo in New York, the Howard in D.C., and the Uptown in Philadelphia. And that was an R&B soul circuit where a lot of the R&B performers would just basically make the rounds of these theaters. And so on Saturday night, I could go to the Uptown Theater and hear all the greats. And I saw Stevie Wonder do Fingertips when he was 12. I saw James Brown and Sam and Dave and Otis Redding and the Temptations, the Miracles, so on and so forth. I mean, everyone. As they came through town. So now I was absorbing that as well. And of course I was playing in bands too as I got a little bit older. And so I was playing a combination of R&B and the folk traditional stuff. And to me, to be honest with you, I see it as one thing. It's not, even though, everyone likes to split things into genres and segregate things into styles, I saw it all as part of this great American, traditionally American popular music evolution, I guess you'd call it. And so, I tried to, as I realized that I could blend these influences somehow or another, and try to pull them together in a way. I was very intrigued by the simplicity and the rawness of the folk movement and the sophistication and the musical sophistication of the R&B, the early R&B songs that were being written and performed. Especially ones with strings and orchestra, background vocals, things like that. So it's just here again, all part of the same, American continuum, but but different in a way. But I try to adapt that today, even when I'm writing songs. I'm trying to draw from all those. That's a very deep well to draw from, and that's what I try to do.
And it strikes me that the mix of music that you are describing, even if you weren't separating that stuff out in your mind, there's some really different impulses in there where maybe, a folk blues performer might play fast and loose with the material and drop a verse and add a verse and improvise. Yeah. And, a kind of music that was really based more around live performance than recording, at least for a while. Right. And then the R&B that you're talking about, those arrangements were, captured on, that was for the studio too, to be captured in its most potent and precise and well arranged form, that kind of precision. I wonder if even in those really early years, were you kind of picking up on, and maybe even in your early bands playing with, the possibilities of either of those things, something, a loose and open-ended approach to music making versus like something that's really, you're really being precise about it and really, with that 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever it is, were you thinking about that stuff?
Wow, Julie. Wow.
You know you were thinking about that stuff.
I think I was thinking about that stuff. Potent and precise. That's a great name for a band. Anyway, I feel like the blues and a lot of this great American canon of popular music, I feel like it's a living thing. I feel like it constantly evolves. I think that everyone, especially in the blues genre, I think every blues performer puts a little of themselves into it and takes the old traditional songs and can adapt them and kind of modify them in a way, but yet hopefully not lose the essence of where they really came from. I try to do that a lot with, I even do that with some Mississippi John Hurt songs. I'll try to add a level. Well, I'll play. Should I just play something?
Yeah.
There's a song that you guys will all know it. It's really made. It's kind of been adopted and adapted by the bluegrass community, but it was actually written by the Mississippi Sheiks in 1933, and it was a blues song. But it's become a bluegrass song, so I guess they just put the grass part on the end. But. So at the end of this song, I'll kind of make it short, so I won't have to play the whole thing, but at the end of the song, I just felt like I wanted to add something that was a little bit of a surprise and a harmonic surprise and a little bit more of a sophisticated twist to it. Was in the spring, one sunny day, my sweetheart left me, she went away, and now she's gone, I don't worry, Lord, I'm sitting on top of the world. Well, she called me up, and El Paso, she said, come back, Daddy, woo. Lord, I need you so. And now she's gone, don't worry, baby. Lord, I'm sitting on top of the world. Down in the jail, back to the wall. Red-headed mom in the cause of it all. And now she's gone. Baby, I don't worry. Oh Lord, I'm sitting on top of the world.
Yeah.
So I added those two weird chords at the end. So I went, and now she's gone, gone. Now that would never be in that song. That just comes from a total, kind of R&B thing. But it was just a pretty thing to do, and it just sounded good. So I added it in. And there you go.
Yeah, yeah. Would you give us an example of, some of the, like an R&B number that was in your head back then that you have, that's among the material you've returned to, reinterpreted, recorded in the last couple of decades?
Well, I was a huge fan of Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. And there was a number of reasons.
Who isn't?
Right. But not only did I love the music, but what really stood out to me as a young kid was that Curtis Mayfield played guitar and sang at the same time. Now that seems, obviously everyone does that, right? But in those days, in an R&B group, it was always a singer with a background vocal group and an orchestra or a backing band of some sort. Very, very few, especially lead singers, actually played an instrument while they sang. Of course, Ray Charles played the piano and things like that. Little Richard played the piano. Chuck Berry, but I'm talking about in the R&B world, especially in the early 60s. So Curtis Mayfield always stood out to me as a very unique guy. I even loved, he played a Fender Jazzmaster, which I thought was really cool. And anyway, I just love his songs. And I also like the fact that he sang in a falsetto, which I do a lot. I kind of add that into my thing. And so anyways, this is one of my favorites. I'll play a little bit of it. Alone there through a caravan, round the campfire light, lovely woman in motion, hair is dark as night, her eyes were like that of a cat in the dark. They hypnotize me with love. She love you, gypsy woman. I love you, gypsy woman. She dance around and around to a guitar melody. And her fire face was all aglow. Oh, how she enchanted me. Oh, how I love to hold her to me and kiss and forever whisper in her ear, I love you, gypsy woman. I love you, gypsy woman. All through the caravan, she was dancing with all the men, waiting for the rising sun. Everyone was having fun. I hate to see the lady go, knowing she'll never know how I love her. I love her. That's enough.
So you're talking about your understanding of American music as this kind of unbroken, lineage where there are so many connections, so many through lines. So when you began bringing your musical ideas to Hall & Oates, how did you see yourself sort of being in conversation with the kind of music you just played, but also innovating in the writing and the arrangements and the production choices, instrumentation, performance approach?
Well, when it came to the R&B and the R&B music that Daryl and I were both heard on the radio growing up, even though we didn't know each other, that was our common lexicon, so to speak. It was really a shared vocabulary that we both inherently knew. So we could communicate without really talking much. And we both could reference the same old records, the same harmony styles, and things like that. So that formed a really serious, solid bond that got us kind of going. But of course, I had this kind of folky background that I could bring to the table, and Daryl had a more classical music training background that he brought to the table. So, even though we had a lot of commonality in our love for R&B music, we had a lot of other stuff that we could draw upon, a lot of tools, so to speak, musical tools, I guess you'd call it. And so
Ideas.
Yeah, chops and ideas. And that's what Hall & Oates became, was this amalgamation of our shared influences and our separate influences.
Yeah. And I mean, there are so many ways that we can take in and measure, take note of how the music that you've made together has endured. I mean, I know people have been asking you for years about the resurgence or sort of the unending popularity, new generations picking up the records and coming to shows. But there are other ways that we can also, see how durable that music is. I mean, I'm thinking of everything from the sampling of the songs and the recordings, which I think I read that you first became aware that people were using and repurposing the music in that way. It was De La Soul. I think.
That was the first time I had ever heard a sample. I didn't even know what a sample was. We were doing a video for a really obscure B movie called Earth Girls Are Easy.
Oh. Anyone seen that?
Don't blame me. We have a B movie fan out there, right? Well, Nile Rodgers was producing the soundtrack for that, and so he asked us to do a song for that. And so we're doing a music video. It was during this MTV bit, and during a break, and we were shooting the video outdoors in Queens, New York, in a park, and in a break in between takes, this little girl came up to the stage and she had a cassette, and she said, "Have you heard this?" And I had no idea. It said De La Soul, and it said "Say No Go," obviously, afterwards I put it, I played it, and I was shocked because they had taken our song "I Can't Go for That, No Can Do," and they had repurposed it, reimagined it, whatever you want to call it, and it was really amazing. It was eye-opening to me because, wow, wait a minute, you can do that? You can take someone else's song and make it something different? I thought it was really unique, and so that was the beginning for me. Perhaps there was other samples going on prior to that, but I wasn't aware of it.
Well, it certainly, I mean, it speaks to how durable, even the textures of those recordings. I mean, the melodies, the grooves, the textures, everything that someone would want to lift from a recording and create a new thing. I mean, that's a pretty good groove. Yeah. Well, speaking of grooves, I think another thing that has spoken to me of how flexible the music of Hall & Oates is the realization that you originally conceived of Maneater as a reggae tune.
Yes, Julie,
and you
I did.
are, and I mean, it is kind of, it's illuminating. It's mind blowing.
Well, I had just come back from Jamaica, and I had a lot of reggae-ish things going around in my head. That's a good way of saying it, right? And well, I hate to tell this story. Oh God, do I have to tell the story?
It's up to you.
All right, I'll tell it. So yeah, I was hanging out. It was the 80s, you know, it was New York City, the epicenter of the crazy 80s. And there was a hangout place in Greenwich Village that we used to hang at. And it was also, you know, very cool. There was all the young Turks from Wall Street making all kinds of seriously incredible money in those days. And actors and models and musicians, everybody hanging out. And I was sitting there at a table with a group of friends, and in comes this gal. And she is absolutely drop-dead gorgeous, like, you know, crazy, suck the air out of the room kind of gorgeous. And she sat down in front of me, and she first thing she told was the filthiest joke I'd ever heard in my life. And her great beauty was in stark contrast to her.
You're not going to tell us the joke?
No, I don't remember the joke. I was stunned. Yeah, her great beauty was in stark contrast to her filthy vocabulary, which I found exciting and scary all at the same time. So as I was walking home, I just thought to myself, man, she would chew you up and spit you out. And I thought, And then I thought of Maneater. She's a Maneater. I said, the songwriter vibe kicked in. And so, as I said, I would just come back from Jamaica. So,
Yeah, show us what that sounds and feels like.
What it might have said. Let me take you back to 1983.
Here's another way that Maneater works.
It's going to work even better in June when it comes out as a recorded version, but anyway. Gonna come out at night, lean and hungry tired. I think you get the idea, right? But I actually, well, wait a minute. I was hanging out with, I did a podcast with Questlove, and I told him that exact same story. And he said, how come you haven't recorded it? And I thought, you know what, I need to do that. And a very good friend of mine who's a producer, a Jamaican producer, we were talking about it, and he said, if you're going to do it, let's do it right. He said, why don't we go down to Kingston and Jamaica, and we'll record it, and I'll get the really great players. And I said, this is amazing. So about a year and a half ago, I went to Kingston, and he brought in some of the guys who played with Bob Marley, Toots and the Maytals, Peter Tosh, all the greats. And it was like an all-star, Sly Dunbar was on drums. I mean, it was seriously amazing recording session. And I don't really remember anything after that. That's pretty much, but I know that the record turned out good. No, I'm just kidding. And so we did. We recorded a reggae version of it, and I readapted the chords a little bit because, as I said, it's a living, breathing thing. And I didn't tell Daryl yet, but he'll find out soon enough. And it's coming out in June, and it's Reggae Man here. So.
All right.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing the fully realized.
Yes, I'd rather you hear
recording.
the recording than a half-assed reggae version on an acoustic guitar.
For a number of years now, you've been doing quite a bit of songwriting, recording, collaborating here in Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that you were in search of a sound or anything like that. I mean, it seems like for you, as you move through different kinds of musical spaces, different places you've lived and worked in different eras, that you're kind of absorbing ideas, possibilities, the techniques of other musicians. So what have you gotten out of expanding your circle of collaborators? All the people that you've written with here, all the people you've made music with here. What have you taken from that?
Nashville has been it's really, I can't say how important my moving to Nashville has been. I came here in the mid-'90s when Daryl and I weren't doing too much. We weren't touring or recording, really. And I was looking for just to be more creative. And little by little, I began to meet a lot of the folks in the Americana. And this was, and actually in the early 2000s when the Americana Association actually began, I was involved with that from the very beginning. And one of the first recording sessions I did here was with Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas and Bela Fleck. And I was so blown away by by their playing and their musical, it was on such a high level. And I honestly felt that I was coasting personally. I felt, I had the Hall & Oates touring and things like that were becoming very, I could do it, without too much thought because it was so ingrained. But I really wanted to challenge myself, and I realized, and what they also did, a lot of the Americana players who I was surrounding myself with, they reintroduced me to this music from the earliest part of my childhood. And I realized, in a way, I thought to myself, I can go back. In order to go forward, I need to go back. So I went back and began to revisit a lot of this stuff that we were talking about earlier, the roots music, the traditional music. And what ended up happening is I began to use it as a jumping off point to be able to create new music, but with the sensibility of some of that old music. And the other thing I did a lot when I came here was start practicing, because everyone was so freaking good. And you guys know, if you spend any time in this town, it doesn't matter where you go. If you're not on top of your game, you're not going to happen here in Nashville. And I felt like I wasn't really at my potential, and so I began to really practice really hard, because I felt like my name would get me an invitation to the party, but in order to stay at the party, you had to deliver, in a sense. So it's been one of the greatest musical experiences in my life. In fact, the greatest probably, to be here in Nashville and to be able to surround myself with these amazing players and the amazing songwriters. So I've gotten a chance to write with so many incredible people,
And I mean, at the same time that you, or maybe not exactly the same time, but in these recent decades, you've not only become a very active participant in that music scene and those festivals and with your peers there, you've also done quite a bit in the jam band scene and you've done a lot with Humphreys McGee and a number of other bands out when you stay in Colorado or at festivals and the jam crews, all kinds of things like that. And I wonder, what it sort of took for you to, I mean, you were talking just then about getting back in touch simply with your musicianship, your chops, but what about that kind of open-ended approach to music making and being ready to be spontaneous and responsive, and if your fellow musicians on stage are playing something incredibly complex, finding your way in.
That's when I leave, Julie.
No, I found plenty of footage of you not leaving the stage, but finding your way in. I mean, what did it take to maybe tap into the impulses that were there deep down somewhere, but bring them back to the surface and kind of find your footing?
Wow. I love spontaneity. I love the chance that something might happen. It's and I don't know how I got involved in I think the way I got involved with the jam bands was through Sam Bush. I did Telluride Bluegrass Festival with Sam, and I think that was maybe that was like a mark of acceptance. If I could play with Sam, then the other guys said, "Oh, I guess he's okay," because he is the king. When it comes to newgrass and all. People don't give Sam Bush enough credit for newgrass. Newgrass, the music that he and those guys invented, basically is the foundation. Between that and the Grateful Dead, that's the foundation of jam band music. That's where jam band music comes from. And to this day, Sam is one of my best friends, and he's just one of the greatest of all time, without a doubt. But perhaps that gave me the cred, and I did begin to play. And one of the things that I think I'm most proud of in my entire career was a show that Jim James and I put on at Bonnaroo in 2013. We did the Super Jam, and we put together an amazing group of people. We had Larry, no, not Larry Campbell, from Sly and the Family Stone. Larry Graham. We had Billy Idol. We had, the list goes on and on. We had Zigaboo was playing drums. We had the Preservation Hall jazz guys playing the horns. We had a rhythm section from Nashville with a bunch of guys that play with me. I mean, the list goes on and on. And it was just amazing. And so putting that together and doing that, by the way, that's on YouTube if you guys want to check it out. There's some really great performances there. So just all those things together, everything was a challenge to put a show of that, of that complexity with all these. Brittany Howard, thank you. Yes. From Alabama Shakes, Brittany Howard and I we sang When Something's Wrong with My Baby, which is a classic Sam and Dave song. Thanks for helping out here, I'm trying my best, but, things get lost in the fog of time. But anyway, things like that, and then playing here again in Colorado I lived in Colorado for 30 years before moving to Nashville. And so, the jam band thing was alive and well in Colorado, needless to say. So I got a chance to play with Drew Emmett and Leftover Salmon and all those guys, So just a lot of fun and, just a great way to stretch out and to explore different things to do.
Speaking of exploring, I mean, with everything that you've done, is there a musical setting that you have, you've been in, you've played in recent years that really stretched you or challenged you?
Yeah. Well, I was telling the guys here today when I got here, because this is the first time I've been here at Brooklyn Bowl, but I played the Brooklyn Bowl in Brooklyn with Dumpster Funk and with Ivan Neville and Tony Hall, and that was amazing. And these are great players, these guys, and they really, and I love just being this, being able to just drop in, because you drop into their world. They've got their act together. They know what they're doing. They know their vibe. They know the songs they want to play, and sometimes you just have to, you have to follow along. Sometimes, it's always a challenge and always a lot of fun, but it tests you. It makes you stretch. It makes you reach for things that perhaps you wouldn't do when you're left to your own devices, and so that's what's fun about it. Yeah.
We're gonna welcome questions in just a second, but before we do that, would you like to play us something that, we've been talking about the unbroken threads of your musical journey.
Sure.
And the continual motion, whether that's, reaching back and getting back in touch with something, reinventing it. When you think of, the creativity that you are working with now and the things that are inspiring you now, those sources of motion, is there a song that you feel like represents that?
Yes, there is, Julie. I'm so glad you asked. People have always asked me, is there any songs that you've done that you wanted to re-record? And I will always say no. I always say no for the fact that I always feel like recordings are they're a timestamp. They're a moment in time. They represent what was happening at that moment, the people, the writers, the players, the engineers, the studio, the emotions, whatever was going on. That's what those songs seem to represent, especially the recordings. But there was one song that I did in 2014 for an album called Good Road to Follow. And I wrote it with Nathan Paul Chapman, who was one of the first guys that I met here in Nashville when he was just starting out. And if you don't know Nathan, he was the one who started Taylor Swift's career, basically. He started with her making demos when she was like 13, and then, of course, produced her first 3 or 4 albums, really put her on, until she became the queen of the universe, basically. But Nathan was an amazing person, and I always had a great, really nice rapport with him. And what had happened was Taylor was ready to move on and use different producers. And I just sensed that maybe he was, who knows what he was thinking. And I called him up and I said, how you doing, man? He goes, I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. This is like a whole new world for me, And so I said, well, let's write a song. And I thought of the Greek myths of Sisyphus pushing a rock uphill. And I thought of that, and I thought to myself, everyone has challenges, and it doesn't matter who you are or where you are in your life. There's always something you're going to have to overcome, and that was the premise for the song which we wrote, and recorded it back there in 14. And I always felt that I let the side down in terms of the music. I thought the words were really good, the lyrics were really good, but I didn't like the record itself. And so when the pandemic came, I began to revisit a lot of my older ideas, and I came across that song. I thought about it, and during the pandemic, the premise of that song just seemed even more on point. And I called Nathan and I said, "Hey Nathan, I'd like to rewrite this. I think the music could be way, way better." And he said, "Go for it," and I did. And when I finished it, I played it for him, and he said, "That's the way it always should have sounded." It's called "Pushing a Rock." I said, "Hey there, brother, can you lend a hand? Feels like I'm hurting, can you understand? Don't wanna beg, cause it kills my pride. Praying I get out of here. My life's unlucky, gone from bad to good. Made some mistakes, I've been misunderstood. Been up and down, trying to turn it around, just to get back on solid ground. Keep on pushing, pushing rock. Don't you ever give up when it rolls back down. Just roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, roll with it. Yeah, oh, keep on pushing, pushing on rock. Never give up when it rolls back down. Just roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, yeah. Keep your head held high, keep trying and trying. Keep your eyes on the prize, hope on the horizon. Got a hole in your pocket, but you keep on searching for a harder goal. When the road gets rough and you had enough, when life hits you hard, but you keep standing tough. Lend a hand, try to help a brother. Reach out to each other, keep on pushing, pushing on rock. Never give up when it rolls back down. Just roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, roll with it. Never give up, keep on pushing it up. Keep on pushing, pushing on a rock uphill. Just roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, yeah. Sun's coming up, sun's going down. Know if I keep on pushing, I can turn this whole thing around, yeah. One step ahead, two steps behind. If I just face every day, I'll get back on my feet in time. Won't you keep on pushing, pushing rock. Never give up when it rolls back down. Just roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, roll with it, yeah. Keep on pushing a rock. Don't you ever give up. Baby, just roll with it, baby. Baby, just roll. That is available to be streamed, folks. Get out your phones right now.
I bet somebody out there has a burning inquiry for you. Ah, see a hand in the front row.
First of all, I've been a huge fan of yours my whole life, or most of my life. You guys came on my radar about the time of Abandoned Luncheonette, and I was just struck by, number one, how unique it was, but the vocals that you guys made together. Did you have, in retrospect, I mean, I'm in the business, so, and I work with and develop artists, and I've been a musician my whole life. Did you have any idea at that point what your impact was going to be on the American music scene throughout your whole career? I mean, did you have any idea at that young stage where this was going to go?
No, really. I play songs from Abandoned Luncheonette live. I play She's Gone in particular. That song, by the way, in this coming October will be 50 years old. So I always say, if someone ever told me back in '72 that I'd be playing a song 50 years later, I never would have believed it. But I'm obviously very proud and happy that all has happened. No, we had no idea. We were just trying to make the best music we could, and that's what we did in our whole career, really. And the other thing, too, even though we had such success with commercial singles and things, I don't think people realize that we've spent as much time and care with every track on every album that we did with the songs that eventually became singles, because we had no clue which songs were going to be the ones that rose to the top. So I'm pretty proud of that, too, because I think we have a large catalog of really, really good quality music that, of course, gets overshadowed by the big hits, but that's okay.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm an artist and songwriter and performer, and first of all, let me say I love your music. It's like always, I hear a different layer every time. Even if I know the song, if it's playing at a gas station or in the store, it pops on, I get to the chorus, and I go, oh, damn, I didn't notice that background synth line before, or the way he switched this harmony here, whatever. Anyways, some of my favorite artists I've heard say things like, for example, Tom Petty said, don't bore us, get to the chorus. Paul McCartney would talk about how him and Lennon would write one chorus, then write another one, and then that would be the verse. And I just wondered if you had any sort of hard and fast rules or just preferences or things you've come back to over the years when you're working on something that you apply to your songwriting.
Well, every songwriting experience is different, depending on who, if you're collaborating or you do it yourself or whatever. Look, the hook is, the hook always has reigned supreme. And now, if you look at the way music, especially songwriting, in a sense, has devolved, I would say, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but look at, things like TikTok labels, where we're devolving to a 30-second song with really just a hook, basically a hook. In a sense, that's kind of how rock and roll started in the early days in the 45s with, a really, a minute and a half song, a minute and 40-second song with a, real tight verse and a, and a great hook. So, here again, everything changes, yet nothing has changed. So, I mean, if you can write a memorable hook, if you can come up with something that really, snags people's attention, well, then you've done it. But, it's not the be-all and end-all. There's still ways of expressing yourself without resorting to the kind of the commercial format, so to speak. But good hook will take you pretty far.
Hi, my name's Jordan Berger, booking agent in town. Thank you for decades of amazing hits.
I'm available for...
Well, so I have more of a thank you inspiration than a question. In 2020, I stared at my backyard that's shaped like an amphitheater, and I created a pandemic concert series for fun when nobody could do anything. And my neighbors and wife were saying, who can you reach out to? And you were one of the very first people who wrote back to me like that. It inspired me to put together this series. We had 30 amazing concerts for a year and a half, and all these people got paid really well. And even though you went to Colorado, I just wanted to say thank you, because I see you out and about in town at the Mercy Lounge and at 3rd and Lindsley supporting young Nashville artists. And I just think that's amazing and cool. And that was my inspiration to keep going and calling people, and all sorts of stars played our series, and loads of people had a great time.
Oh,
so
well,
thank
thanks,
you.
man. Do you have more money now than you had when first? No.
All the money went to the artists. It was all because of you.
I just want to preface this with this is a really dumb question. And also, I'm sorry if Questlove beat me to it. But I need to know for myself, have you seen the scene in 500 Days of Summer that uses your song? And what is your thoughts on that? Because it's my roommate's favorite movie scene ever. And I get to flex on him that I got to ask you that.
Of course. Well, of course, I'm prejudiced about this, but I think it's one of the best combinations of film and music, and I think it's right up there with Fred Astaire and Judy Garland and all that stuff. No, honestly, and I'll tell you a funny story about that. I knew that the song had been, was being used in the movie, but I had no idea how they were going to use it. A lot of times, it's over the end credits, or, someone's going down the road in a car and it's on the radio in the background, So my wife and son and I were in L.A., and we decided to go to an afternoon matinee to see this movie because we wanted to check it out. So there was no one in the theater except us and 3 teenage girls who were sitting nearby. And we get to the scene in the park where the song begins, and they're doing that amazing choreography and all the animated, birds. And all of a sudden, the girls start clapping and cheering. And I was like, whoa. And I was like, obviously, this is working. There's something going on here. And that was really the start of You Make My Dreams Come True becoming this crazy, it just caught fire, and now you can't get away from it anywhere in the world. And interestingly enough, You Make My Dreams Come True wasn't a big hit when we released it. In fact, it was never released outside of America. It wasn't released in Europe or England or the Far East, as all of our other songs were released, and they were all hits around the world. And You Make My Dreams, I think, went to like number 5, which of course is great, but it wasn't this massive hit. And now it's our biggest selling record. It's streamed over 1 billion streams, already. So it's crazy.
Not a dumb question.
So you said at the beginning of this that your knowledge and relationship with music has spanned over decades and generations and throughout movements. And I'd love to hear from you what you're most excited to see come forth from the coming generation of musicians.
What I'm most excited to see coming from the next generation of musicians is that the next generation of musicians is able to preserve the integrity of organic music. As AI begins to rear its very frightening head, I am concerned. I am very, very concerned because I just had ChatGPT write a song for me recently. And
What was that song about? Please
I
tell
just
us.
said, write a John Oates song about a girl on the beach in California. 3 seconds later, I had 5 verses, and I was like, oh my God, what has God wrought? Because I'm concerned because there's an art and a craft, especially to songwriting, and it's a very magical thing to be able to create something from nothing, and to be able to create something from nothing that actually resonates with people, and they can have it speak for them. They can, when a person, I think the beauty of, especially, and I'm focused on songwriting here, because the beauty of being a songwriter is that you're able to articulate for people something emotionally, whatever, that perhaps they can't articulate, but they can't speak on. And it's an amazing, beautiful thing that has been part of our, humanity's, from the beginning of time. When the first person banged on a rock or banged on a stick or a log or something. So I'd hate to see that disappear and become a something that has lost all its humanity. So I'm a little bit, I spend too much time on YouTube. But anyway, yeah.
I've tried ChatGPT songwriting
How have
too.
you-
I mean,
yes?
as a joke, I've done it 25 times
Yeah.
with just different topics. So I'm wondering, how good were the lyrics? How good was the rhyme scheme? Because I found it to
wasn't
be
bad. It was
Really?
not bad. I hate to admit it, but it's true. It just wasn't bad. And you know what? I'm going to go off on a little bit of a rant here, real quick. What I'm really concerned with, and I know this might seem far-fetched, But does this really mean, if this continues the way it continues, is it the end of education for children? Because there's no reason for kids to go to school if they can find the answers for everything at their fingertips. There's no reason, really. What would be the reason? And also a very segmented and narrowly focused education where they're only learning what they want to learn specifically and have no frame of reference for anything else that may have happened or that could be very important as a human being. So that's my little rant. Sorry. Well, that shut him up.
I see that hand.
All right, we're talking about songwriting, but I wanted to know about concert touring. Was that more of a necessary evil for you, or did you really enjoy the live performances as well? And was that inspirational for future songwriting?
Oh, I've always felt that live playing is part and parcel of what we do. It's not separate. It's integral to being a professional musician. And I just did 4 in a row, literally, finished yesterday. So I'm still playing all the time. I love playing. It's the only, it really is the only art form where, think about being an actor. You create in this kind of void, with technicians and cameras and lights and things, but you get no feedback from anything. And think about being a painter. You're painting most of the time in isolation. You're creating, you're expressing yourself, and there's nothing. But when you play live, it's the only time you get immediate feedback. You get an actual response. And, it's a great yardstick to know. I know from experience now, if I introduce a new song, I can tell that song's either staying in the set list or it's gone. And you can tell immediately from the reaction you get from the audience. And there's no substitute for that.
I wonder, you were talking one aspect of technology, AI, but you mentioned streaming. As far as the many ways that people can enjoy and engage with and take in music now, all possibilities are on the table. Every form of physical medium and streaming, everything like that. What have you learned, and what are you learning from watching how people choose to to find your music? The music that you're making now, the music you've made in the past.
Well, I think it's a really great thing that this digital revolution has enabled everyone to express themselves. It's also a really bad thing. It's enabled everyone to express themselves because you have to wade through a lot of stuff in order to find things. But then again, it's out there. I'm in the process of releasing a series of streaming singles, which I started in November, and we're on number 3 or 4 now. And every month I put out a new song, and I've never done that before. And I've also never done a project that had no physical component. There's no vinyl, no CD, no nothing. And I've never done that. I wanted to try it and see what happened. It's been interesting, and I'm learning a lot. I partnered with some really great, with The Orchard and with Black Box, who's helping me with the digital, marketing and strategy. And it's been really interesting because I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning that you kind of have to always be there. You have to always be on. You have to not only, you release a song, but that's not good enough. You have to release an acoustic version. Then you release a live version. Then you release an alternative version. So it's this really, you have to keep these algorithms cooking. You have to keep them simmering. And it's interesting. And I've like I said, I've learned a lot. And and so far it's kind of working.
There's a couple hands up down front.
Do you have a preferred way of collaborating when you write, with obviously you wrote for a long time with Daryl Hall, and with you said you've been collaborating with other local people and everything. Is there sort of a, you write something, you send it to them, or you get together? So what are your processes that you enjoy?
Well, during the pandemic, I began to write on Zoom, which I had never done before, so that was a new one. I didn't feel comfortable at first, but now I'm very comfortable with that. But there's no substitute for, being in a room with a human and really, really vibing. I think that the key for me with collaboration is to. It's an interesting thing, collaboration, because especially with people you don't know very well. Once you establish a rapport and a routine with a partner or a collaborator, then of course you get your groove on and you have a thing that you do, right? But when you walk in, especially in Nashville, there's that kind of that contemporary country corporate writing style where you show
Appointments.
you show up at an appointment at 9 or 10 and you write until noon, you have a lunch, and then you're writing. It's never really worked very well for me. I've tried it, and but at the same time, I think what I find interesting about it, it's kind of there's almost like a psychological component to it. You walk into a room with a stranger, and if you don't know them very well, you don't know what they're bringing to the table. You don't know what they're capable of. You don't know what they're interested in. And a lot of times I've found, because of my reputation, people expect a certain thing from me, or they think they expect a certain thing from me. And maybe they want to write something that sounds like a Hall & Oates song, or that might be their expectation. And that's okay, but it never really works very well, because as the process unfolds, it's usually. And then for me, I'm always wondering the exact opposite. I'm wondering, what do they really want from me, and what do I want from them? What is it that they're going to bring to the table? So it's this little kind of psychological dance that I think you have to play when you're working with a collaborator who you don't know very well, and that's always interesting, and it's exciting to do that, I think.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, sure.
I work at a small independent music venue in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was just curious what your favorite, fondest memory at a small independent venue is, whether that as an artist or as a patron or a fan at a show.
I'm in the process of doing an acoustic show right now, and it's just myself and a percussionist, and we play all old theaters. I love old theaters. They were made for music, and I love the size, around anywhere from 300 to 800 or something like that, and it's just, I feel like I can communicate. I feel like it feels like a more intimate experience, especially when you're, giving the background and the stories behind the songs. And so I basically I just finished a run in California of 3 old theaters that were absolutely all built in the 20s and 30s, and it's just very comfortable. I just love it. Okay, I think we're done.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
Julie Hight, everybody, she's great. She makes things very comfortable. Thank you, Julie.